Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the DCA South of Airport Aircraft Noise and Mitigation Study. My name is Dawn Hawkins Nixon, and I am the Associate Director of the Sustainability Division within the Prince George's County Department of the Environment. Deborah Patrick, who is our Administrative Specialist for the Sustainability Division, will join me this evening, and we will be the facilitators for tonight's meeting. Before I hand over the meeting to our Acting Director, Adriana Collarelli, I would like to share some housekeeping guidelines for tonight's meeting. To reduce background noise and ensure that all participants can hear the presentation clearly, microphones will remain muted during the meeting. We kindly ask that you submit any questions you have in the chat. Mr. Allardyce will address the questions at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to introduce our Acting Director, Adriana Collarelli, to offer a welcome. Adriana?
Hi, welcome to tonight's community meeting regarding the DCA South of the Airport Aircraft Noise and Mitigation Study. I'd like to acknowledge that joining us this evening is Floyd Holt. He is the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer of Prince George's County Government. He approved the county's participation in the study. Before we begin tonight, let me update everyone on how we arrived at this stage. So Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, also known as DCA, has been a concern regarding aircraft noise since about the 1960s when jet service began. Annual operations have consistently increased, resulting in greater noise impacts on communities around DCA. While DCA serves as an essential transportation asset for the region, the noise produced by flights to and from DCA impacts the quality of life for residents, particularly those living along the Potomac River. To help identify strategies for reducing noise impacts on communities north of DCA, Vionair Consulting, an airport noise consulting firm, was hired in 2020 by Montgomery County, Maryland, and Arlington County, Virginia. Through a collaborative effort that included the participation of community members and staff representatives from the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, the DCA Community Working Group, and the Federal Aviation Administration, Vionair recommended changes to the DCA airspace and flight procedures. Following the success of the North of the Airport project, the City of Alexandria, Fairfax County, the City of Alexandria in Fairfax County, and Prince George's County engaged Vionair to carry out a similar initiative for the communities south of DCA. This work follows a similar model used in Montgomery County. The focus of this project is minimizing noise impacts in communities south of DCA. This project started in May 2023 with the contract funding allocated equally across the 3 jurisdictions. The public survey for comments was completed in July of 2024. The main concern we found from that survey was aircraft noise. The design team has finished its proposed recommendations, which will be presented this evening. Each jurisdiction involved in the study will host a separate community meeting for its residents to share their recommendations. And this one is ours. So now I'd like to introduce James Allardyce of Vionair, who will present tonight's presentation. Good evening, James.
Good evening. How is everybody tonight? We're going to start out with the welcome, which we just got done, and go through a quick project overview. We're going to talk about the design team and the design philosophy, recommendations for flight plan changes, flight path changes, and next steps. At the end, we'll have Q&A. As Dawn said, please just put your questions into the chat. And at the end, we'll have those questions read to me and I'll respond to those. And then if the questions that you had asked don't get answered, those will be placed into the frequently asked questions section of our website later. So, south of the airport was initially affected by the Metroplex changes in 2011. The picture you see on the left is an example of the way the aircraft used to fly. What happened before Metroplex was aircraft took off from runway 19 at DCA, and once they reached approximately 3,000 feet, they were turned on course by the air traffic controllers. After the Metroplex project of 2016, those routes were automated. They were turned into satellite-based routes. We refer to those as RNAV, or area navigation. And the effect was to tighten the routes down into very narrow corridors. And so the people that might have previously been affected by some overflights probably get a lot less, but there are groups of people who get constant noise and constant overflights because of this change. So this looks like what it looks like on the departure end. We got some more examples coming up of what it will look like on the arrival side as well. But first, I wanted to tell you about the working group, the steering committee, and our design team. So within the design team, there is a entity called the Roundtable, Community Roundtable, or Community Working Group, that is hosted by MWAP. And each of the counties surrounding the DCA airport are represented. So south of the airport is a subgroup of that. And the people that it shows under the CWG representatives on the left side of your screen here are fellow citizens that live with you and feel with you what you feel. So these people were integral in the designs that you're going to see tonight. Vionair took more of a facilitator role in this to ensure that the criteria that the FAA puts forward was applied, that operational considerations were considered, taken into account, and also that safety was not compromised in any of the things that we're recommending going forward. In addition to that, the folks on the right side of the screen were the steering committee. They're the ones from each one of the counties and city of Alexandria that oversaw the project. They're the ones that held the purse strings. They had the money on the project, and they just kind of made sure everything stayed on course as we went through. So I want to spend a little bit of time on the design philosophy. The design philosophy is, in my opinion, the most important part of this project because it defines what success looks like. In any project that involves moving airplanes from one place to another or from one flight path to another, there are people that are going to be really happy because the airplane moved from over my house, and there's going to be people that are not so happy because the airplane got closer to my house. So by definition, on a regional scale project, we really can't judge success or not by whether or not it flies over a particular neighborhood or a particular person's house. We have to have a broader scale by which to judge whether a project was effective. So again, the community members that live with you and experience the same things that you do were in the process of designing this design philosophy. And what it is intended to do is prioritize in a hierarchical order what is the most important things to our neighborhoods. What are the most important considerations that we have to take into account when we're coming up with these designs to make sure that we address the concerns of the community. So when we did this, we kind of took a whole bunch of ideas and threw against the wall to see what would stick. We took out the stuff that was out of scope. We took out the stuff that could not be done for one reason or another. And then this was the priority list that we came up with. So the highest priority was to maximize flight paths over the center of the Potomac River and quote unquote compatible areas. including industrial areas, major highways, and utility corridors. So compatible areas are basically non-residential. Residential is not considered a compatible area. So if we can keep the airplanes over these other things, industrial areas, highways, utility corridors, etc., or the river, then that's good. The next one was to maximize altitude. So a lot of the noise is caused by aircraft flying lower than maybe they need to fly. So there's a couple of different places where we thought we could probably increase the altitude that aircraft fly over the neighborhoods. One of them is on departures, and I'll explain how we went through to try to get airplanes higher sooner. And the other one is on arrival, where this community in particular had been lobbying the airport for a long time to raise the altitude at a fix called Katrin, which is in the vicinity of Accokeek. And so those things were addressed as well. So to maximize the altitude was a high priority. Increase track variability where we can do that. It's to try to reduce concentration over noise sensitive areas. I will say that after next gen, with the advance of RNAV procedures, increasing track variability gets a little bit more difficult because the FAA has stated time and time again that RNAV and satellite navigation is the way of the future, and they're not going back to the way things were. So to try to increase track variability becomes a little more challenging, but we think we have some answers for that as well. Avoid disproportionate impact to any single entity, community, county, town, neighborhood, etc. So what we're trying to do here is to make sure that no one entity bears the burden of all of the flights or the majority of the flights. We want to try to make it more spread out, more quote unquote fair. So the last one is minimize overflights of noise sensitive areas such as schools, hospitals, churches, historic sites, parks, etc. So if when we're doing the design, we can do number one, great. If we can't do number one, then we try to do number two or number three. But it's not exclusive. In other words, you can do number one, number three, and number four. If you can do all of them, great. So we tried to do as many of these as we can. But at the end of the day, if the flight procedures that we have come up with can be mapped back to this design philosophy, then we say that the project has been successful. So that's why we believe that the design philosophy, defining what success looks like on the front end of the project, is so important. All right, so the project area, the primary study area, is pretty much centered along the river. It goes into Fairfax County, into Alexandria, and into Prince George's County. It barely touches Charles County, but there is very minimal, if any, effect on Charles County in this project. And but this, within the blue line to the south of the blue line, is pretty much the primary area of concern. Now, we did go a little wider in some of the things, but that's the primary area that we took a look at. So while I'm briefing you, you may hear the terms north flow and south flow. So quite simply, north flow is when the aircraft are landing and taking off to the north. So runway 4 goes kind of north-northeast, runway 33 kind of goes north-northwest, and runway 1 goes pretty much north. So if they're approaching the airport from the south and landing to the north, or they're taking off from the airport to the north, that's a north flow. Conversely, exactly the opposite is a south flow. So when they're in a north flow, Prince George's County is experiencing the arrival side of the aircraft. When you are in a south flow, Prince George's County is experiencing the departures going south off of the airport. So into the procedure changes. Now, this is a bunch of gobbledygook here, but basically what it says is that the South of Airport Committee on the CWG for a long, long time had been trying to raise the altitude from 2,500 feet to 3,000 feet over the intersection at Katrin, which is approximately over Accokeek. To do that, we had to address the approaches to runway 1, and we also had to address the STAR, or standard terminal arrival route, that feeds the approach to runway 1. The primary approach to runway 1 is the ILS. It's an instrument landing system. It is the approach with the lowest minimums to that runway, which means when the clouds are really low, the airplanes can get down far enough to get below the clouds. It actually takes the airplanes down to 200 feet and maybe in certain conditions below 200 feet above the ground to be able to see the airport and land. So the ILS is the primary approach to runway 1 at DCA. And to get that altitude at Katrin higher, we had to take a look at the approaches and the standard terminal arrival route, which I'll show you here momentarily. All right, so when we're talking about sound levels, one of the things that we talk about quite often is decibels. And we also are going to talk about tonight a metric called number above. So number above a decibel, number above 55 decibels is what we used for this project as just kind of a standard overall noise metric that we felt, and the community feels, most communities feel, is representative of their lived experience. So what does that sound like? So, you know, a vacuum cleaner, that's around 75. Garbage disposals or food blenders get up in the 90 area. And your kid's stereo playing Rock Band is up about 110. So normal speech comes in around the mid to high 60s. So if you're standing out in your yard and you're talking to somebody who's 3 feet away from you and an airplane goes over and disrupts that speech where you can't hear, then it's probably more than 65 decibels. So when we talk about decibels, we're going to be talking about number above 55, number of events that occur above 55 decibels. And that's what the equivalent sound levels are that you see. So this is the one that I was talking to you about, the thing that the folks on the South of Airport Committee have been trying to get addressed for literally years. So the STAR is representative of the approximate location of Katrin, the Katrin waypoint. And aircraft today routinely come over that waypoint at about 2,500 feet. And between Katrin and the airport, maybe even lower. And so one of our goals was to increase the altitude at that waypoint. And then, you know, to follow on from this is to encourage the controllers to use it as much as possible at that 3,000 feet. So to that end, we made some design changes that will help them organically start using that. And I'll explain some of those as we go forward. But this is the first thing that we really wanted to address. All right, so how do you get there? So the CAPS arrival is the STAR that comes in from the south, the standard terminal arrival route that comes in from the south. The CAPS arrival feeds aircraft to Katrin over Accokeek today. So this is basically the route that a lot of airplanes take today to come into Katrin over Accokeek and then turn the final into runway 1 or circling into runway 33. So what we did was we took the 737-800 is the aircraft that we use for this noise display, and we compared what it would look like if the airplane flew the approach the way it is today, and what it would look like if the airplane flew the same approach the way we think it's going to look like after the modifications that raise Katrin. And simply raising Katrin, we're reducing the number of events, and what's in those parentheses is the number of events. And the other thing says, like you can see just north of Accokeek, it says VNM 385. That's what we call a virtual noise monitor. But at that location, we're expecting to reduce the number of events by 7. And these are this is not a monthly. This was compared to the amount of flights that we took in a snapshot for a day. So that, 7 to, between 4, 5, 6, 7 events per day less at decibel level 55 and above is what we expect to achieve. Now, is that a night and day difference? No, it is not. It will be, we believe, perceptible. It may not be audibly perceptible, but it will definitely be able to look out the window and go, those airplanes are higher than they used to be. So this was the metric that we used just to show that. So what's changing? How are they going to get to Katrin differently than they do today? So there's a couple of different routes that the aircraft flying the CAPS star take. So the red routes are the routes that the airplanes fly on the CAPS star today. So this picture has both a north flow and a south flow represented. So if you look at the furthest red line to the left, that is aircraft that are approaching the airport from the south when the airport is in a south flow. And what we did with that was the red line comes up and it turns to the northwest, west of the airport, and it enters the downwind for runway 19 north of the airport. So on this side of the airport, what we were able to do was move that furthest left red line slightly to the right where the green is, but we took the airplanes up 1,000 feet. So they're 1,000 feet higher, but they're a little bit further to the east. What that allows us to do is when the departures come out, I'll show you the departures here in a little bit, but I want you to remember where that green line goes. The departures then will be able to climb higher sooner because we moved that red line, the very far left red line, to the very far left green line. That allows the departures to get higher sooner. Whenever they can do that, the higher they are, the less noise that they make. So that's part of that hierarchy that we said about getting the airplanes higher, raising the altitude. The other thing that we did was the furthest red line to the right. If you look to the south, the way it comes in today is it comes over that intersection called Hall, and that's just a waypoint where the aircraft turn and join the final approach course. This is the published route that aircraft take today. The other route that aircraft take today is almost that left green line that kind of goes right up towards Katrin. It's not exactly that, but it goes towards Katrin. That's kind of a shortcut. But if they fly the standard terminal arrival route, they stay on the furthest right red line to Hall, and then they come in and they join that ILS I was talking about earlier, where they can follow the approach to the runway. So one of the things that we did was we moved that red line from over land to over the water. So it comes over the water and then it joins that final higher out there. So the new initial approach fix is just north of Hall, and it's hard to see, but it says IAF new. At that point, the aircraft will be at 5,000 feet. So by doing that, we're allowing the aircraft on the east downwind of the airport, east of the airport, that are going south, and they're going to turn around and come back to the north, to stay at 4,000 feet. and the ones on the west to stay 3,000 feet. It deconflicts traffic, so it is a safety improvement. And one of the things that we're trying to do with these designs is to try to improve safety and improve efficiency as much as we can, because if we don't, then the likelihood that the FAA will implement this goes down. So we want to give the FAA something too in this deal. We want to give them safety and efficiency improvements so that it will be more likely that we're also going to get improvements in the noise impacts. So this is the main changes to the CAPS arrival, and the bottom line is it keeps the airplanes higher over Prince George's. So this is an example of how the Freedom and the Troop stars come into Prince George's County, and the airplanes come into Prince George's County today. So if you look on the left side of the screen, you'll see a red line with some red arrows, and that is where the Freedom and Troops stars come into the airspace today. They come over that waypoint called Victory, VCTRY, Victory, and they turn south, and it comes over, as you can see, some really densely populated residential areas in Fairfax County. And then as it crosses the river, it just continues to the south, and the star itself is pretty much like it's indefinite, right? It goes to the south, and it's up to the air traffic controllers to turn the aircraft into the final when they can. And that's what these dashed yellow lines represent. Those dashed yellow lines represent where the air traffic controllers take over, they take the airplanes off of the star, and they vector the aircraft to the final approach course. So they turn them in, and these are just representative. I mean, the lines can be anywhere in between there. These are just examples of where they might turn the airplanes. Now, the new star, or the new configuration of the star that we're recommending, is the green line all the way to the far left with the green arrows. So that moves the inbound flights away from more densely populated area, puts it over less densely populated area. It's hard to tell, but there's kind of a creek bed that it goes over there for a while, but then it goes over a military base and over the river, and then it joins in at the Hero intersection, which is an existing intersection, and then it goes south, and there's no changes south of that Hero intersection. So where it comes across the river from that point on, there's no changes to that. But the aircraft are still vectored off the final, or off the star to the final. And then again, we're trying to make sure that altitude at Accokeek is 3,000. If the aircraft are coming in at 4,000 feet or so on that green line now, it'll be easy to keep them above 3,000 because of air traffic rules when they clear them direct to that waypoint Catron, which is right over Accokeek. It'll be very easy to keep the airplanes at 3,000 feet. Now, I will say they don't have to do that. They have another thing that's called minimum vectoring altitude. If they take the airplanes and they vector them, they can take them to the minimum vectoring altitude. Outside of Catron, or outside of Accokeek, is about 2,500 feet. Inside, there's a final approach fix. They can actually even go lower than that. But we're trying to set this up in a way that it makes it easy for them to stay on the star, stay on the approach, use Catron at 3,000 feet, and organically start using those higher altitudes. So it's not set in stone. They don't have to do it, but it is highly encouraged and designed for them to be able to do that easily. So we keep our fingers crossed that it'll keep going, and we're going to keep following up with them as we can, just to see, first of all, whether or not it's going to get implemented. And if it does, that hopefully we can encourage them to keep the aircraft staying at those higher altitudes. And to that end, I will say that all these people that are on the design team, they're still going to be on that community working group. They still interface with the airport and with the FAA several times a year. So they're still going to have the connectivity there. They're still going to be making the requests for the airplanes to stay as high as possible, as much as they can. All right, so let's flip the script. We're going to go over to departures now. So in the departure arena, there's a couple of things that we did to enhance safety and efficiency. And one of them is that we redesigned the departures so that the aircraft that are departing runway 19 can now use a flight procedure or a separation procedure that they had previously not been able to use in all weather conditions. Either that or they had to take the aircraft off the SID, and I say SID now, this is Standard Instrument Departure, and they had to take them off the SID to achieve standard separation, but now they won't have to do that. So brings the SIDs within FAA criteria, and it allows them to use a separation standard that they could not previously use. Again, enhancement of safety and efficiency at the airport. And so they, I think they're going to like this a lot. So let's look all the way. The very, very far left red line is aircraft coming off of runway 19, and they come down all the way at the bottom left of the page. You can barely see that red X there. It's Fimby is the name of the waypoint. That's where the aircraft fly today. And the ones off of runway 15 come on the next over red line, and they fly down over that Fimby intersection as well. So take those two red lines and you shift them to the east, and the green lines now go to the new Fimby, F-I-M-B-I waypoint, all the way to the bottom left part of the screen. That location was not randomly picked. It was required by criteria. There is SIDs that turn east from there, and there has to be a specific leg length on that SID that the aircraft have to have that track length for the computer to recognize the route, make the turns that they have to do. So the Fimby location was as far east as we could move it within criteria. So it was not just randomly picked, it was a criteria thing that put it there. But that is what enables that new separation standard to be used. That is what enables the safety and efficiency improvements. So what it did do, though, however, is the furthest left green line actually moves to the east of the most populated area of Fort Washington. And then the easterly green line stays over more commercial industrial areas until it gets down to the Fimby waypoint. From Fimby on out to the east and then up to the northeast, there was no change. The next part I'm going to show you is down to the southeast of Fimby. So to the southeast of Fimby, the green line where they come together moves quite a bit east of the Fort Washington area. And as it goes further south, it skirts along the eastern edge of some more highly populated areas and gets over less densely populated areas as we go to the southeast. This is just further on down the line to show that it still kind of stays to the east of more populated areas and continues on southeast. But by this time, the airplanes are getting pretty high, 8,000 to 9,000 feet by this time usually. All right, so this is the other side of the departures. So if you look up towards the airport's all the way at the top of the screen, kind of top right corner there, and it says DCA RW19 DER. So that's DCA Airport, runway 19, departure end of runway, is that one little star there. And if you follow it to the south, there's kind of a purple line there, but then there's a red line that kind of breaks off to the west a little bit. That red line is the existing flight path. And you can see that that red line is closer to Alexandria, right as it goes by the Alexandria shoreline. if you look just to the east of that red line, you see it's purple and then it kind of turns into green. So that purple and green is where the new flight path is going to go. So it moves it a little bit further offshore, closer to the center of the river. And one of the criteria requirements that we had to do was to make that line come straight off the runway so that they could apply that separation standard that I've been talking about. With that coming straight off the runway, it moves the aircraft to the middle of the river. It allows for them to apply the separation standard, and then it takes that green line down to that CAPVIC, CAPVC, CAPVIC intersection. Now today, all the airplanes turn right or to the west at the CAPVIC intersection. Anything going northwest will continue from that yellow line onto that purple line to the left of your screen, and then the aircraft will go to the northwest. Any aircraft going southwest will fly that yellow line, turn down the red line, and go down to the southwest. So the number of aircraft that follow the red line to the southwest is approximately 43% of the westbound departures. That's northwest and southwest combined. So approximately 43% of the westbound departures follow that red line. Those 43% we put over the river because nobody lives on the river. And so when the airplanes come down the river and turn down to the southwest, the airplanes stay either over the river, or when they come back over the land, they're back over either government land or very, very sparsely populated land. And what it does is, this was kind of more towards a Fairfax fix. It allows a reduction underneath that yellow line of the amount of traffic that they experience by 43%. And the other thing that, if you'll remember, we had that north-south red line that went over there when we changed the arrivals. Those arrivals moved to the southwest. So those folks over there in like that Hibiya Valley area, Fort Hunt area, those folks are not going to experience the arrivals anymore. So it just takes, when they get from the south flow to the north flow, they get a flip-flop where they don't have traffic in one operation or the other. So that worked out very well for that, and then bringing the airplanes down the river. But we wanted to show you this because it does affect the Prince George's County, in that some of the airplanes are going down the river now instead of just turning west there at that CAPVIC intersection. So what are the next steps? Those are the changes in a nutshell. We're doing this public meeting tonight. After this public meeting, we're going to give everybody an opportunity for more feedback. The design team will review all the feedback that we get from this meeting, and the other public meetings that we're holding for Fairfax and Alexandria. And then we will take a look and see if there's anything glaring that we've missed, if there's other input that people have that have a better idea of doing something maybe we didn't consider. And we'll take a look at it and see if we still believe that the designs that we have come up with are optimum. And what I mean by optimum is, we believe that the designs that we have come up with are the best we can do within current technology, within current criteria, and within current operational parameters. So what I mean by that is, the FAA criteria changes all the time. As it stands today, these are the best designs that we can do to stay within the required criteria. And the criteria is the design criteria for the SIDS and STARS and approaches that ensures that they're safe to fly. Operational parameters, there are considerations that the facility needs to do. And when I say the facility, I mean Potomac TRACON, the air traffic controllers need to do to ensure the safety and separation of aircraft. And when we get feedback from you all, we have to take that on balance with the criteria and the operational requirements. And one other thing I wanted to mention, because this has been asked several times, and that is for the arrivals in particular, why can't the arrivals from the south follow the river like they do from the north? So the reason the arrivals and departures, for that matter, follow the river from the north and to the north is on the north side of the airport, there are prohibited areas. So prohibited areas or prohibited airspace is the airspace that immediately surrounds the Capitol. And aircraft are prohibited from flying into those areas. Therefore, when you depart off of runway 1, you have to take an immediate left turn to miss those prohibited areas. And when you're coming into runway 19 from the northwest, for anybody who's flown in, you're coming in from the northwest and you make a real sharp turn and then you land. That is not by choice. That is by necessity. And from the air traffic control standpoint, they would much rather do a straight in approach from the north and departures, straight out the way they do it on the south side. They would much rather do it that way, but they can't because of those prohibited areas. So we get that question a lot. Why can't you just come down the river on the south side like you do the north side? Because it's a necessity on the north side. There's no choice. We have to do it that way to miss those prohibited airspace, but you don't have prohibited airspace on the south side the way you do there. So the most advantageous approach to an airport is a straight in. I talked about the ILS earlier. The ILS is the standard approach that the airplanes use most often, and when they're coming in from the south, and it gives them the lowest minimums. So pretty much any airport, if they can, they want to go straight into the runway from about 10 miles out. That's pretty much the standard nationwide, and that's what you have on the south side here. And the FAA and the air traffic controllers are loath to change that. So anyway, all that being said, any other changes that we need to make based on the feedback that we get will be taken into consideration, in the final configuration of the procedures will be taken to the CWG, the community working group at the DCA roundtable, and we're looking at July, August timeframe for that. The full CWG must vote on these procedures, whether or not to send them on to the FAA. Basically, what happened on the north side project, the North of Airport subcommittee agreed to everything, and the South of Airport subcommittee took a look at it and said, does it affect us positive or negative? No, it doesn't affect us in any way, so we won't oppose it. And they voted for it, and that's how the North of Airport project got put into the FAA. The same thing's going to happen here. The South of Airport folks say, yep, this is what we want to do. As long as it does not affect anything on the north side of the airport, the North of Airport committee will more than likely vote for it, just like, as reciprocity for what happened before, and it should go through. Then the recommendations go forward to the FAA. We're expected to submit sometime late summer, early fall this year, 2025. Once it goes into the FAA process, it could take a while, folks. I'm just telling you, the staffing in Oklahoma City is very low right now. Oklahoma City is the place that the flight procedures branch is located, and the flight procedures branch used to put out approximately 150 flight procedures per 56-day publication cycle, and now it's down to 50. So they're at 1/3 of what their capacity used to be. At this point, the FAA is pretty much only looking at safety issues with flight procedures. Anything beyond that, it's just going to be a while before they can really take a look at things that, for even efficiency, let alone noise. So just to be candid with you all, this is going to take some time. We've heard up to 4 years before they, you could expect for something like this to be implemented. Now, things change, we don't know, but that's the number that we've been hearing recently, unfortunately. So once it gets submitted, goes to the FAA, they go through their process, and they may or may not approve the recommendations. So we're very hopeful that since we did very similar process to the north side, that the south side will get approved too, but it's unknown at this time whether they'll approve it. So they are still recommendations. It's not a done deal. All right, so how do you tell us what you think? So hopefully you've been putting your questions into the chat, and I will try to answer them as best I can tonight. You can go to the email that you see on your screen here, SOA@Vianair, VIANAIR.com, SOA@Vianair.com, and you can give us your comments. It can be about anything. If it's something that we've talked about specifically tonight, which is within scope, great. We can take a look at it. If you put a comment in there like, why don't you close the airport? Well, that's out of scope, and we'll just tell you that's out of scope. So you'll also be able to view tonight's presentation on the mypgc.us/aircraft noise website. And I think that's it for me. Ms. Dawn.
Thank you, Jim. I'm sorry, Deborah has compiled the chat, questions and comments in the chat. Deborah, do you want to come off mute and walk through those questions and comments with Jim?
Maybe.
Yes, they were still coming in, so I was trying to get them.
That's all good.
Get them all.
Yeah, and if we don't get to your questions tonight, they'll be we'll compile them and put them on the frequently asked questions part of our website. So
Okay.
fire away, Miss Deborah.
Okay. Someone in Bryan Rose wants to state that they're 2 minutes from Accokeek, and they are definitely majorly affected by the airplane noise. And they have footage inside of their home showing how loud these planes are for them. So I guess, and going along with that question, with that statement, the next question was, how many flights do we currently have above 55 decibels per day?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have that number right off the top of my head. You can go to the Vianair website, Vianair, www.vianair.com/SOA, and there are monthly noise reports there that we have published, and they have some of those numbers in there for you, where you can look at the numbers of aircraft that fly the various procedures. Those are in those reports, and there's several, years of monthly reports that are there that give you the noise information and the operations that aircraft are flying on the various procedures. There's a lot of information there, so I would say go check that out.
Next question, where is the Catron 3000 location exactly?
So it's right in the vicinity of Accokeek. It's pretty much where that star was that I showed you earlier. Right about where that star is. That's a fairly accurate representation of where Catron is. And today, like I said, the airplanes are coming over that fix at 2,500 feet. And our recommendation is to raise that to 3,000 feet. There is some noise benefit to that. Like I said, it's not going to be night and day, but there is some noise benefit to that.
All right, and next question, this is two-part. Why do the flights not follow the river as much as they do north of the airport where a lot of work was done to ensure that? And why is Southern Prince George's County not getting the same effort when it comes to moving flights over the river? There are still people that live in Southern Prince George's County, and we also expect the flights to remain mostly over the river. It feels like not enough was done to move the flights over the river in southern Fort Washington. The new green flight path still goes right over southern Fort Washington.
So yeah, I think I preemptively answered that. We had talked to the folks at Potomac Tracon before we started on this, and it was made pretty clear to us that if we made a recommendation where we moved the arrivals over the river where it was not straight in, that they would not approve that. So it's just, what hill do you want to charge? And that was not a hill that we thought we should charge, because we're pretty much told that they wouldn't approve it. And again, the reason is the primary approach there is an ILS. What an ILS is it's a radio beam that goes straight down the runway to the south out 18 to 22 miles, and it's a straight line. And they have to follow that beam to fly the ILS, and it does not curve. It cannot curve. Now, they can do other types of approaches that do curve. There are RNP approaches that do curve. But if the primary approach is that ILS, they want the other approaches to line up with it. It's just a matter of safety and sequencing the aircraft to the final approach course. And we discussed it. We even asked, well, what about the visual approach? And they said no. We want everything lined up the way it is. So it's not that we didn't try, and it's not that we didn't ask. It's that we were told no.
Okay, there's a comment basically that says there are changes for Fairfax County, but not for Accokeek. And also, it's next question, please tell us how your proposed guidelines fit the plan proposed for Southern Fort Washington. Basically, this person is saying that the design philosophy that was the criteria seemed to be missed in the proposal for Southern Fort Washington, as if to say, it doesn't appear that the criteria of maximizing flights over the river, increasing track variability, avoiding disproportionate impact to any single entity, and minimizing overhead flights over noise-sensitive areas. There's a statement that they don't believe that philosophy was used for Fort Washington.
Right. And you know, that's a good question and a good observation. I will say that, let me get back down here to the departure piece. I will say that this does that to a degree. It's not perfect, but it's what we could do within criteria by moving the aircraft a little bit to the east. So the airplanes that were flying over this part right here are being moved a little bit to the east. Again, it's not always feasible to move them further. And that's because of this waypoint right here, this Fimby waypoint right here, is that we could not move it further east within criteria. Therefore, this couldn't go a lot further east, because it has to connect back into the departure point, you know, like 40 miles south. But this line here, which you can't really see, but there's a line that goes here, and then the departures to the northeast turn up there, has to be the leg length that it is. And so we couldn't go much further east. So within criteria, within the safety criteria that the FAA gives us for flight procedure design, we were able to do that. Conversely, on the northbound, and this is, again, this is Katrin, this is Accokeek, on the northbound arrivals that come over here, that is, again, that's a function of that ILS. It's where the ILS goes, and we can't move that. It's just a beam that goes straight out, and it's not something that you know, is available for us to address for moving. And again, the it was not a function of the team. If the team could have done anything they wanted to do carte blanche and just throw anything out there and the FAA would approve it, you know, sure, we would have done that. But we have to work within the constraints that were given by the FAA, and that was a very strong constraint. Was the ILS goes right through Katrin, right through the, you know, the edge of Fort Washington here. That is a beam that comes out from the runway, and we can't move it.
Okay, please explain the thought process of doing a northern and southern study separately, and how does this study align with the previous northern study commissioned by Montgomery County and Fairfax?
I think it's just the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So that's what we did. We were initially commissioned by Montgomery County and Arlington County when we went into the north of airport study. It's also a matter of money, you know, be quite frank with you. At the time, the south of airport folks did not join in on that project. So we're just commissioned to take a look at the north side. We did that. And we had some success up there. In the meantime, the south of airport folks got a coalition together where they were able to come up with the money to fund the project, and here we are. So, like I said, we made promises when we were there. When we were doing the north side, we said, whatever we do up here, we won't affect the south side. And we did the same thing when we're down here. Whatever we do down here won't affect the north side. So we're trying to keep those, we have kept those promises in these notional designs that we've come up with.
So what's to stop the airport from returning to the previous level of noise, and who will monitor the noise levels?
So the good news is that the flight procedures will be designed to, and I hesitate to use permanent, but they designed so they could be a permanent solution. If the FAA wants to change the flight procedures for some reason, they can. They have to go through a NEPA process to do that. National Environmental Policy Act requires them to inform communities whenever they're going to make changes that have significant impact on noise. And there's various and sundry definitions of what significant is. The one that is most commonly talked about is the 65 DNL, which unfortunately is not a good metric for you all. The 65 DNL at the airport does not extend out very far. Again, you can go to the noise reports that we have on our website that I referred you to earlier. And those noise reports will show you where the 65 DNL is. If you're outside of the 65 DNL, according to the law, it is compatible. So when we try to do these things, we're kind of on the edge. We're kind of skirting the edge of the law. We're trying to say, yeah, it may not be exactly what the law calls for, but you know, this is a good thing to do. This is the right thing to do to try to mitigate the noise as much as possible within these areas, even though the law doesn't require us to do so. And so far, we've had some success with the FAA doing that. And we're very hopeful that we'll continue to have success with this project.
Okay, it looks like you're moving things over to satisfy Virginia. Who did you say is paying the money for this report?
So Fairfax County, Alexandria, and Prince George's. So there are mitigations for everyone, and all of the design team was represented for every change. So we had representatives from Fairfax, Alexandria, and Prince George's County on the design team all the time. And we talked about all of these changes, and we talked about the potential impacts of each change and how it would affect everybody. And it was agreed to that these were appropriate changes and that it complied with the design philosophy. So, you know, if you have other ideas where you feel like we could do something better than what we did, shoot us an email, soa@vinair.com, and we will put that into the next design team meeting that we have and take a look at it to see if there's something that we can do better.
What is, or is there a probability of flights over Accokeek going higher than 3,500 feet regularly?
What is the probability on arrival? Probably not much. I think 3,000 feet is a reasonable expectation. I think higher than that is not. And the reason for that is that the standard glide slope to the runway is 3 degrees. And if you go from the runway on a slope of 3 degrees out to Katrin, you're just right about there. I think it crosses Katrin at about 3,050 or 3,100 feet maybe, but it's right at or below the standard glide slope, which is within criteria. So aircraft, generally speaking, do not like to approach the airport above glide slope because that is what they deem an unstabilized approach. A stabilized approach is very critical in the industry, and they have to, you know, they have rules or regulations within the airlines that require them to be on a stabilized approach. And if they're not, they're supposed to go around and try again. So being on a stabilized approach is a big deal.
Okay, comment, the updates around flight procedures are very disappointing. It appears there are virtually no changes for those impacted by this issue in Southern Maryland. As expected, VA, it seems to be prioritized. This is environmental injustice that we were talking about. Why are you not doing more to reduce noise over Fort Washington Park? That is a major park that the community and public enjoys, and there are constant flights over it all the time. Why can't the flights be moved over the river and not over the park?
Yeah, I think that's been asked and answered a couple of times.
Herb Jones of Tantala North Area Civic Association has major concerns with the approach at the DCA. Flights are more frequent and based on observations. The aircraft are approaching at lower altitude and created both noise and health concerns for 500 or so homeowners. And then someone said the same issue is occurring in Bryan's Road also.
So as just explained, I think that the highest that we can get the aircraft within criteria is 3,000 feet. So we've done what we could in that area within criteria and within the safety guidelines. Like I said, it's not night and day. It's definitely, you know, not going to eliminate the numbers of aircraft that are flying in there, but maybe we'll get them just a little bit higher, and that'll help some.
I have a serious concern. The current draft study on Southfield departures at DCA overlooks something critical. The duration of noise and not just the volume matters. While areas like Old Town endure short, sharp bursts of airplane noise, communities near Mount Vernon experience long, sustained overflights that wear on people hour after hour. Our neighborhood is already significantly impacted by low altitude arrivals that bring prolonged noise throughout the day. Yet the study relies solely on Lmax, a metric that captures only the loudest instant of a noise event. It completely ignores how long that noise lasts and how deeply it disrupts daily life. For us, it's not just how loud it gets, it's how long it stays, layering outbound departures onto an already burdened arrival path creates a compounded impact that the study fails to recognize. We need a smarter, fairer approach, one that reflects lived experience and uses metrics like DNL and SEL to capture cumulative effects, not just brief peaks.
So we did look at DNL, and unfortunately, the area down along Mount Vernon is outside of the 65 DNL. Therefore, the NEPA requirements are few, if any, that require any mitigations or modifications out there. So we chose to use a metric, and they're saying that we used LA Max. LA Max, yes, but in a number above configuration so that we could see how many events were happening. There's another event or another metric that can be used. At the time we did the study, we didn't have the capability within our software to do it, which was time above. It's how much time was an aircraft noise above a certain level. So we did not have that metric available to us. I think from the standpoint of time above or number above, that, yeah, those are good metrics, and they tell you what the lived experience is, and they more accurately, I believe, represent what the day in and day out experience of the community is than does DNL. But the problem is the way the law is written, out beyond the 65 DNL contour, there's nothing that they're really required to do. So what we try to do is to minimize the overflights of the population that's affected by any aircraft. And as a matter of fact, in this study, as a general rule, where we put the new flight paths, the number of households affected went down. So we are affecting less population with this noise than is currently. So, you know, the short answer is that given the criteria that we had to comply with the FAA, given the operational constraints that we had to contend with the air traffic controllers and the TRACON, we believe that the alternative that we've come up is the best available. So I know I've heard this comment before. I've heard the same comment many times. What I don't have is a suggested alternative flight path that they gave us. So if somebody has a suggested alternative flight path than the ones that we have chosen, be more than happy to take a look at it. But I think just the metric, it's going to be informative about what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're seeing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an action associated with that. Again, there's two things that I think speak directly to that experience. Number one is a change in the law, and that's not something that we can do here. And the other one is a change in the aircraft themselves, the types of engines, the configuration of the aircraft that change the noise that the aircraft put out. Again, outside the scope of what we're doing. But you know, we believe that the flight paths that have been designed into these notional procedures are probably as good as you're going to get right now. But again, we're open to alternatives.
Your explanation of the arrival flights coming from the south was information heavy, but in a nutshell, it appears most flights will go over Prince George's County, and in fact, it appears you have moved the flight path more over Prince George's. Is that accurate? And if not, can you please show that again?
Sure.
I guess they mean go back to that map.
Yep.
Is
Let
it,
me,
is that accurate? If not, please show that again, that the flight path has been moved more over Prince George's.
yeah, so this is the flight path today. Again, this right here is the flight path today. They also come from out here and go direct in here to Katrin. So kind of along where the green line is, although that green line is for the Capstar up there, but that's a pretty good representation of where a lot of the flights come today over here. And then this comes into this Hall intersection today and then turns north and comes over Katrin. So this is the published procedure today. Again, the new published procedure for the Capstar, we came in over the water and turned here. So it doesn't really change from Hall in, other than the fact that it makes these airplanes higher out here than they were. This, again, this fix here is 5,000 feet. There were no intermediate fixes between here and here before. So they came from here directly down to 2,500 feet. Wherever they got to 2,500 feet, that's where they got. So they could be dragging down here at 2,500 feet. So what we're hopeful of is that the aircraft can come in out here, descending to 5,000, cross this fix at 5,000. They could come direct to that fix at 5,000. And they could still come direct Katrin, but hopefully they'll cross Katrin at 3,000. There's no reason to cross it lower if they're coming from out here. So really, the changes for Prince George's are getting aircraft higher. Again, these aircraft here, we raised the altitude from 7,000 feet along this route to 8,000 feet along this route. So we made it higher here, and we made these airplanes are coming from 9,000 feet out here, descending to 5,000 feet here, and then Katrin at 3,000. So we made it higher. Because this line right here is the ILS, we can't change where they go. We've just got to see if we can get them to that ILS better than we used to. So that's the main change to Prince George's, is to get the aircraft higher.
The changes that were mentioned, that the aircraft would be higher, will those be mandatory changes, or will they be changes that the air traffic controller will have the decision to make whether those higher altitudes are utilized?
The air traffic controller always has the option to change it based on traffic and sequencing. But once you get into a published flow, in other words, once the flight procedures are published, if they can stay on the procedures, they usually do, unless there's an operational advantage to taking them off the procedure. In other words, if they had an airplane that was coming in this way, and to fly this line would put them in conflict with, say, an airplane coming this way, they may want to shortcut that airplane up there so they can turn this airplane in behind it and not have a conflict out in this way. So sequencing aircraft sometimes requires them to take them off the public procedure or published procedure so that they can get the aircraft in line to land. And they have very specific spacing requirements that they have to do, especially because runway 1 and runway 19 are the longest runway, the runway that most air carriers take. So what they're trying to do is be as efficient and consistent as possible. Normally, they space the airplanes approximately 5 miles apart, I'd say 4 to 5 miles apart, because that gives enough room for one airplane to land and then them to depart an airplane between the first arrival and the second arrival. So for them to sequence, they don't want to do it haphazardly and have like 3 miles between these and 7 miles between those, just so they can keep them on the procedure. They want to have 5 miles, 5 miles, 5 miles, 5 miles, and they have to vector the airplanes to make that happen. So can the air traffic controllers take them off the procedures? Yes.
The proposals are very disappointing. Who should constituents contact with their concerns? This does not seem satisfactory at all compared to what the north of the airport received. Please, let's get this right while this is still being done. There has been minimal community engagement and it has not been well publicized. My emails to Vianair have not been responded to.
Okay, so sorry about that. If they were not responded to, I apologize. I know we had a transition. One of our consultants left the company, and so now the email is going to where it's supposed to go. I get them directly now. So if you send me an email at that email address, which I will post again, soa@vianair.com, I will respond. And first stop, I would say, send your recommendations for changes to that email. Second stop, go talk to the folks at Prince George's County and tell them what your opinions are and stuff like that. Anything is within the realm of possibility. You can write your congressman, you can write your senator, you can write the FAA, you can write the airport. Whatever you feel is the appropriate move for your input to be considered. Again, I'm sorry people are disappointed. We believe that we've done the best we can do within the design philosophy and criteria and safety requirements. Unfortunately, at this point, really, the options are status quo, and whatever we come up with at the very end based on the input that we get. So if we get some input that we look at and we go, wow, we didn't think of that, we can implement that, or we can propose to implement that, we'll do that. But I will say that we have to go back and compare it to what we know the criteria is, what we know their operational requirements are. And if it was just about noise, if it was only about noise, we could come up with some really cool stuff and put airplanes all over the place. But it's not just about noise. It's about noise, it's about efficiency, and it's about safety. And we have to consider all three of those things. And when you're talking about safety and efficiency, and the FAA's interest in those things, you have to accommodate them as well, or the likelihood of getting anything implemented goes way down. So what I would encourage you all to do is, number one, if you have a wonderful idea, shoot it to us. Absolutely. We'll take a look at it and see if there's any modifications we can make to what we've done. But the other thing is, I would ask you to consider, is what we're proposing better than what you have today? It may not be perfect, but if you believe it's better, we should do it and then continue to try to make it better in the future. It's not perfect. We know it's not perfect, but it's as best we can do within the criteria and guidelines that we have.
Okay.
So Deborah, sorry to interrupt you, and I do appreciate everyone being engaged in this evening's conversation. It was our intent to ensure that the residents were aware of the recommendations being put forward. So we are more than pleased that you were able to join us tonight to hear from the consultant about the proposed recommendations. I will have to say that we have an end time of 8 o'clock. We received about, looks like about 97 comments. I know we're not going to get through all of them before 8 o'clock. So I'm recommending, Deborah, maybe you ask one more question, and then the remaining question and comments we will take from the chat, and we will forward them on to Vianair, Jim Allardyce with Vianair, to address those questions. So Deborah, you want to make the last?
Why not schedule another meeting though, if there are so many questions?
Yeah, so at this point, we don't have a schedule for another meeting. That's something we'll have to go back to our partners with. We're all part of a agreement for the study to figure out how to accommodate an additional meeting. If we can build in an additional meeting under the current contract that we have for the study, we'll try to do that. Otherwise, is there any opportunity, Jim, for residents to engage in the meetings at the level of the CWG, or is that off limits?
So CWG meetings are public. They can go, and I believe they have some public comment within the CWG. It's not as extensive as we've had here tonight. They can, again, they can contact you all and the representatives of the CWG from Prince George's County that represent the communities in Prince George's on the CWG. Through you, I guess, would be the best way to do that. And then also at the end of the project, once we get all these frequently asked questions, those will be put on the website, and a final report will also be published and put on the website with recommendations that we're going to put forward to the CWG. When the final CWG meeting is set for a vote or a final briefing, we're going to give a final briefing in the CWG of if there's anything that changes between now and then, it will be briefed at the CWG. And if there's any input at that point, people can give their input at that point and make comments through the MWA website. So there is some opportunity for input going forward. And at that point, I think it would be more like yay or nay than making suggestions for additions or corrections or alternatives to the study. I think but that's totally up to the CWG. The CWG can make up their own mind about whether they're going to take additional input or not. So there may be more opportunities going forward than what I've even said.
Okay, so we'll have to explore what opportunities are available to us to accommodate additional meetings of this sort at the community level, or an optional meeting at the next level up, which would be the CWG meeting. Okay. So Deborah, do you want to ask? We got 4 minutes.
I'll just make this one last and combine it with another. North flow arrivals seem to still be stuck converging on Catron. Can't the load be shared? Raising the altitude is welcome, but 3,000-foot flights are still a major nuisance when they are coming in every 90 seconds, which makes it difficult to carry on a conversation. It's a major highway. If a major highway, the busiest in the region, were constructed directly through our backyard, residents would have legal avenues for recourse. When the equivalent of such a transportation corridor is placed above our homes, we are met with bureaucratic hurdles and dismissive response.
So I've got a partial answer for that, I guess, is from the aircraft that are coming in from the southwest, there's kind of 3 main places they can go now. They can go to this waypoint out here coming in along the final. They can go to this new IAF here at 5,000 feet and then join the final. They can still go to Wreck Catron. Catron is there because it's on the ILS and it's an intermediate fix on the ILS. I know that doesn't mean a lot to y'all, but there's not, like I said, there's not a way to move that fix anywhere. So unfortunately, it's just on the straight in final for runway 1, and not trying to be dismissive, just trying to give you the facts. And the fact of the matter is that the runway 1 ILS goes over Katrin. We're raising the altitude of Katrin in our proposal, and the folks that we had talked to in the FAA about moving other approaches over to the river, it was not met with enthusiasm, shall I say.
Alright. Okay. So with that, I think I'm going to have to close out the meeting before we get cut off with a Zoom call. So I want to thank you for joining us for tonight's meeting. We want to invite you to visit our webpage at MyPGC, the last bullet item here, mypgc.us /aircraft noise for more information and to view a recording of tonight's meeting. If you have any further questions, comments, please email them to the email address you see here, soa@pioneer.com. Again, all questions and comments that are emailed to this address will be responded to by our consultant, Jim Allardyce. And again, thank you for joining us tonight, for being engaged, for staying in on the call to the very end. Look forward to hearing back from us eventually on how we can perhaps accommodate another meeting within the current contract that we have. Right. So again, thank you so much, and we do appreciate your time and your attention and your care to join us and let your concerns be heard. So thank you for that. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Deborah. And everyone have a good evening.